potestas, exousia, or as we know it, power. Power through money, power through the force of arms, power through eloquence and the movement of the masses. It is the driving force of human society. A modern election or an ancient war between kingdoms are, in its essential aspect, the way power flows between entities and, quote-unquote, distributes itself throughout society. Well, you, my viewer, you participate in this back and forth of power as just another cog in the human machine. When you buy something, you exert monetary power. When you try convincing someone of a point, you impose your oratory power. When you vote, you distribute your power, which in turn was given to you by a more powerful entity, in this case, your government, which in turn exerts its power over you. But throughout history, there have been individuals who had a special relationship with power. They wanted more, to exert more power over others, to always accumulate more power. Some simply were born in power and took full advantage of it to push their own objectives. These are the tyrants and dictators of history. And of course, many of them struck coins. Today, let's go on yet another little journey, from ancient Greece all the way to the early Middle Ages. Let's look at some of history's most important tyrants and dictators and see how they used their coins as just one more tool on their endless crusade for power. Let's go! I commonly say here that in ancient times, coinage was one of the most powerful vectors of propaganda, but I've realized I didn't actually go into the whys of that. Why did time and time again kings and emperors gave so much emphasis on making sure that the coins circulating made it abundantly clear to everyone that they were in charge? When you see a gorgeous Greek coin, for example, it isn't just finely made because the Greeks loved art. Yes, they loved art, but this beauty is there to call your attention for a message. And a metal object that is desired by everyone decays very slowly with time and circulates quickly between people. It's the perfect way of letting everyone know of your rule at a time that the only alternatives to that would be to erect a monument on every city of your kingdom with your name on it, which would be very expensive, or pay someone to go around and speak publicly about your great deeds, which is also quite expensive and unreliable. Coinage was just orders of magnitude more efficient. The issuing of money has always been the monopoly of the state, and from a modern coin all the way to the first coins, apart from the information of how much a piece is worth, you will always find three informations on your coin. That would be I, and you can insert any king, emperor, prince, republic, rule over you. The second message would be, let me make abundantly clear that either by democracy, divine right, military power, I am the unquestionable authority. And finally, sometimes discreetly, sometimes overtly, but always there, every coin tells you, these are the lengths I will go through to enforce my right to rule. And the thing I find really interesting with tyrants is just how elegant, although dangerous, their messages on coins are. Well, I've been philosophizing about power for the last 5 minutes, so how about we actually bring some coins in and start giving examples to what I just said? Let's explore the dynamics of power on coins, shall we? And following a chronological order, let's start by the ancient Greek world. The Greeks are credited with the creation of democracy and the fundamental institutions which would evolve into the traditional Western democracies of modern day. But the Greek world was just as full of tyrants and iron-fisted rulers as any other groups of peoples. One of such tyrants was Agathocles of Syracuse, a fascinating man, staunch defender of the Greek way of life, and interests, he's seen by many historians in some sort of positive light, a defender of Hellenism at the frontier between Hellenistic and Punic world, as he was constantly in conflict with Carthage. But he's one of such cases where the victorious get to write history and maybe nudge it in its favor. We can't forget that this man of impressive feats and was also capable of appalling feats of cruelty. His own ascension to power happened with the invasion of Syracuse, the deposing of its elite, and the slaughter of some 10,000 of its aristocrats. His own conquest of the land came with promises to re-establish the rule of the many, but he's called a tyrant for a reason. He just seized the power for himself. But at least one thing we can credit him is with the striking of some incredible coins. The coinage of Agathocles reinforces the old Hellenistic mythos. As we can see on the obverse of this piece, the stetadrachma, it shows us the goddess Persephone, or Kore, as she was also called. Very, very intricate bust. Signature of the Mint of Syracuse. They just had such incredible die engravers with minuscule details such as different directions where the hair flows, the earrings, the tiny weed stalks coming from her head. So remember when I mentioned the key informations given on a coin? Like, these are the reasons I was given the right to rule, and these are the lengths I'm willing to go in order to enforce my rule. Well, that is exactly what we find in the reverse. We see Nike, the goddess of victory, marvelously sculpted, naked all the way to her waist. She represents that Agathocles' military victories and rules come as a direct blessing from the gods. But, blessing from the gods or not, these victories would come with the force of arms. Nike is seen setting up what is called a tropaion. This is where the word trophy comes from, and that's exactly what it is, a battle trophy. Both Romans and Greeks, after winning a battle, would gather the best arms and armor from the defeated enemies and erect a small monument, like this one we see on the right. These were offerings to the gods. Disturbing, or gods forbid, stealing from these trophies from the field was a major sacrilege. Next, we stay in the Greek world, but move forward in time a little bit. Let's head to between the years 175 and 164 BC. We are in the middle of the so-called Hellenistic period. Most of the Greek world was divided in major kingdoms, ruled by totalitarian monarchies. One of such kingdoms was the Seleucid Empire. So the coin we have here was struck under Antiochus IV Epiphanes, or in Greek, God Manifest. Jeez, we know that someone with that nickname is going to be very full of himself. Antiochus is very well known in Jewish history as a major villain. In his efforts to Hellenize the region of Judea, he ruthlessly persecuted Judaism, transformed their temples into temples to the god Zeus, all the classes of atrocities one would do to wipe out a culture off the face of the earth while establishing their own religious supremacy. If you were a citizen of Judea at the time, you would probably see one of those coins, a tetradrachma of Greek style and in Greek standard. On the obverse, we see the portrait of Antiochus, with the curly hair Seleucid monarchs are known for. It's a really exquisite piece in hand, and it's so full of detail. And he can also be seen wearing the imperial headband that symbolizes his divine right to rule. The reverse is an unequivocal show of authority. We have Zeus, the king of the gods, seated on his throne, holding a small Nike, the symbol reminiscent of the coinage of Alexander the Great, and connecting his rule directly to that of Alexander. The legends are quite self-flattering. We can read Basileus Antiocho Theo Epiphanos, something akin to from King Antiochus, divine and glorious. Many tyrants in history have had their poor fame put in check by revisionists, seeking to see if they were truly evil or not. Antiochus, however, it's one of those cases where people widely accept he was indeed fantastically authoritarian. All of his territory just had to be stomped and put into conformity with the Greek ideals that he had set for his empire. But for our next coin, we switch from a guy that was clearly bad to, well, I'm bound to cause some arguments here. Here we have the most famous Roman who ever lived. For some, a power-hungry lunatic who killed the Roman Republic and caused genocide through the Gauls. For others, a revolutionary and liberator who toppled the corrupt institution and ushered the golden age of Roman hegemony. No other than Julius Caesar. I ask you, actually, my viewer, in which band are you? Do you like him or do you not? The coinage issued under Caesar is actually very prolific. It isn't rare to find a coin of him. However, what we have here is a special coin. Caesar had the audacity to put his own face on a coin, the first living Roman to be featured on a coin. This was a very serious business back in 49 BC, when this coin was struck at the Mint of Rome. On the obverse, we can see the head of Caesar wearing the laurel wreath, the symbol of conquest, victory, and that would be adopted in the iconography of the future Roman emperors. Notice the way Caesar was shown. This is interesting. This is a little bit of an art history lesson here. It's odd. He's full of wrinkles and clearly an older man. It's not a very flattering image. This just shows the realistic depiction of an old, experienced Roman. This was how Roman aristocrats actually liked to be depicted back then. Older, seasoned veterans. It's not about a baby face. You're supposed to be out and about, a contrast to the youthful portraits you always see on Greek-inspired coinage, for example. The legends are also interesting. We can read Caesar Dictator Perpetuo, or Caesar, Dictator for life. This name, Dictator, needs a bit of contextualization though. We are used to it meaning a totalitarian ruler, but in Republican times, a dictator was chosen by the Senate in times of emergency. Therefore, it did not have the negative connotations it has today. It was basically a strongman for crisis situations with exceptional temporary powers. The thing got unusual when Caesar was elected as dictator for life, while the position was typically restricted to only 6 months to a year, a massive break in tradition. The reverse is one of those marvelous propaganda moves Caesar was so good at. The gens Julia, Julius's traditional family, claim to be direct descendants from Venus, and this is what we see on the reverse, the patron goddess of Caesar. She is seen looking at a small victory on her hand and holding a staff with a star, symbol of divine right. The legends make reference to the mint official responsible for the issue of coins for that year, a man called Publius Sepulius Macer. Now, Caesar's reputation as a tyrant or a liberator might be a dividing theme, but what is not a divisive subject is the character for our next coin. Here we have Caligula, probably one of the greatest villains of Roman history due to his sudden and extreme shift to a tyrannical maniac. This is your run-of-the-mill denarius, struck at the Mint of Rome. Let's take a look at it. It's almost underwhelming that such a crazy character like Caligula has very unpretentious coins struck under him. On the obverse, we see the type of portrait and legends you would find on any normal emperor. We see the bust of Gaius, Caligula, looking right, with the legends Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, Pontifex Maximus Tribunicia Potestas, showing that he took the main positions of chief priest, emperor, and tribunician powers as per normal tradition. On the reverse, we see another portrait. Caligula was the son of Germanicus, a very prominent and popular Roman general, who was himself adopted by a previous emperor, Tiberius, and this paved the way for Caligula to rise to the purple. But such an indirect ascension to the position of emperor is never free of risks and possible pretenders. So this reverse in this coin is a message. It's an attempt to acquire legitimacy. By connecting himself to the popularity of Germanicus, Caligula was making sure to pass the message that he now was the only legitimate emperor, that he was, quote-unquote, from true Roman stock, a man, son of another great man with his inherited qualities. The legends proclaim the titles once occupied by Germanicus. We can read Germanicus, his name, Caesar, heir, Pontifex, priest, Censor, censor, something akin to a controller of good Roman morals among society, a very prestigious position. Caesar Augustus Germanicus. This part might sound like a repetition from the beginning of the legends, but it's actually making reference to the fact Germanicus is the Caesar of Tiberius Germanicus, a title given to his adopted father as he conquered the Germanic tribes. Understanding Roman legends is not exactly straightforward and requires a little bit of getting used to. The last couple of Roman coins I've shown you are from very well-known figures and might discourage some people to collect them due to the high price tags they can fetch. But fortunately, the next Roman I will introduce you to is just as fascinating. He was capable of equal brutality, but his coinage, fortunately, it's very abundant and affordable. And we are talking about Caracalla, the son of the Emperor Septimius Severus, who himself came to the throne after a bloody civil war. Caracalla is always depicted on sculpture, coinage, and literally every single resource you look as a very serious, no frills man, probably partly due to his father, who ruled Rome with a very firm hand and gave his sons advices such as be harmonious with each other, enrich the soldiers, and scorn all others. And scorn others he did. Caracalla is not known by a lot of people who are not very into Roman history, but if you collect Roman coins, you are bound to get a coin of him because they are just affordable and abundant. And once you do some research on his reign, oh, you are up for a surprise. He completely alienated the Senate, murdered his brother, purged all of his supporters as to maintain total control over the empire, massacred the population of Alexandria after being offended by a play that merely mocked him, among a massive list of things that made him dangerous and insufferable. Not only he was a very bloodthirsty man, but his bouts of megalomania were constant. He said to constantly request seafood to be served to him, but only when he was on campaign and was far enough inland for it to be a very expensive food and hard to acquire. And may the gods protect you if you were given the task of finding him seafood and you did not deliver. So how about we take a look at some coins of this lovely character, this little ray of sunshine. Caracalla issued many denarii like this one. This example is from the Mint of Rome, and on the obverse we can see the very serious portrait of him with the laurel wreath. In the legends, no signs of Caracalla. However, this is because that was his nickname, after the little cloak he liked to wear. We can read his full name and title, Antoninus Pius Augustus Britannicus, the last title celebrating his campaigns with his father up in the British Isles. The reverse makes allusion to his North African descent. If there is one saving grace for such a horrible man like Caracalla, is that his coin reverses in particular are quite interesting. Here we see the god Serapis. Serapis was a syncretic god, established all the way back in Egypt under the Ptolemaic pharaohs, as a mixture between the Greek Zeus and the local traditional pantheon. And it was also worshipped in North Africa, where Caracalla's family is from. So we see Serapis raising his hand in a position of greeting and blessing while holding a staff, and the legends continue Caracalla's imperial titles stated on the obverse. So we read Pontifex Maximus, Tribunicia Potestas 15, Consul Tertium Pater Patriae. Next, I wanted to show more of Caracalla, but I felt like this video was overextending a bit on Roman denarii, so I've decided to pick another coin from Caracalla to illustrate how abundant his coins are, but a different type, a different denomination. The empire was very vast and needed coinage issued on other places, as the central mint of Rome did not produce nearly enough coins for the whole empire to function. This is the fruit of one of the many branch mints established on other regions, in this case at Phoenicia, at the city of Tyre, at the eastern Mediterranean. And this is not a denarius, but a tetradrachma, a much bigger and heavier coin, since the eastern parts of the empire still use the traditional Greek denominations, and the Romans just saw that the economic situation there was working, so why to try to impose our own denominations if what we currently have just works fine? I particularly love these kinds of coins, such a different style that we have here. From the realistic depictions of Caracalla on the denarius, we go to this very stylized bust of him in this one. The bigger flan allows for much more detail to be put on the portrait, even if it does not necessarily respect human proportions. I need to admit, when I see this bust, a pufferfish immediately comes to my mind, but don't take my brain of a 12-year-old to prevent you from appreciating the cool fact that such a vast empire meant there was very diverse artistic ways of depicting people like this. The legends are in Greek, but basically replicate what we saw in the denarius. We have Autocrator Caesar Antoninus Sebastos, a proclamation of Caracalla as emperor, just like in the denarius. Once we head to the reverse, we see the eagle, very common symbol on Eastern silver coins, and an obvious allusion to Jupiter. It is seen holding a laurel wreath on its beak, and it's standing over a club, the symbol of Hercules and of military power, so a very authoritarian message, very typical of Caracalla. And the legends reinforce his position as consul and his tribunician powers, so the same authoritarian and tyrannical message you would see on a denarius, but adapted to a locally accepted denomination. And finally, for our last coin of the day, how about I bring you a little bit of gold? The successors of the Western Roman Empire to the east, the Byzantines, also had their fair share of tyrants and dictators. One of such tyrants was Phocas, who ruled between 602 and 610 AD. After taking advantage of an uprising against the previous emperor and taking the throne for himself. As with all good tyrants, he did the standard procedure. He purged much of the previous imperial administration, including the most competent and skilled people that were faithful to the previous emperor, putting his personal entourage in their positions, only to immediately plunge the empire into defeat after defeat by foreign enemies. Phocas would be deposed, and just like he did with the previous rightful emperor, he would be deposed by his poor command, executed, and became a dark mark in Byzantine history as just a dirty old villain. This is a tremisis, a third of a solidus, the main gold coin of the Byzantines and one of the most important coins of the early Middle Ages. You could bring this little guy everywhere around Europe and it would be happily accepted by every single merchant. On the obverse, we see a simplified bust of the emperor, as you couldn't really put much detail on such a tiny and small flan, wearing the imperial regalia and a jeweled diadem. The legends, Dominus Noster, our Lord, Phocas, Perpetuus, or Eternal, Augustus, Emperor. The reverse is very simple. A bit of a shame. The Byzantines were at that stage very capable goldsmiths, maybe the best in the world, but the vast number of these tremises being struck meant that dies had to be made in a rush due to the influx of gold. We see a cross and the legends, Victoria Phocas Augusta, the victories of our Emperor Phocas, which is ironic since his rule is marked by failure after failure. These sorts of collections that span different civilizations on wide time frames fascinate me and show how ancient coin collecting is just so flexible. You don't have to stick to Romans or stick to Greeks or anything of that time. You just pick a broad theme that interests you, for example, such as Tyrants or Generals or anything historical that calls your attention, and you do your own research, and you are bound to find a massive number of potential coins for your collection, potentially spanning thousands of years. This is really fun to make your collection tailored especially for your kind of historical interests. And that leads me to the lovely sponsors of this video. If any of these coins interest you and maybe, just maybe, you would like to add them to your collection, our friends at Savoca Coins will be organizing their 118th silver auction next November 21st, where these and many other great coins will be up for auction. Their silver auctions focus on higher quality pieces, so if you're looking for quality, for good condition, and for rarities, definitely check them out. There's something for everyone there. Greeks, Romans, medieval, Byzantines, even modern pieces. And if you're watching this video after the auction date, don't worry. Just head over to savoca-coins.com and take a look, as other auctions should definitely be happening soon. So now I want to hear from you, collectors. Let us know who your favorite villain is. History is unfortunately full of horrible, vile, and tyrannical people who rose to prominence, but at least they left us some of their coins as a material mark in history. So I hope you all enjoyed this little video. Leave a like and consider subscribing if you did. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.